The morning started like any other in Seoul, but Dr. Kim Mina felt something wrong in the air. She stood at her laboratory window watching the busy streets below. People hurried to work, cars moved through traffic, and everything seemed normal. But then the sky changed. Dark shapes appeared above the city. They were huge ships, bigger than any building. Their surfaces looked like black crystal, smooth and cold. The ships made no sound as they hung in the air over Seoul, Tokyo, New York, and every major city on Earth. Kim Mina had studied alien life for 20 years. She knew these were not friendly visitors. These were the Zorathi, a race that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They were different from other aliens because they never spoke with words. Instead, they used their minds to control others. The Zorathi had a special power. They could reach into the minds of other beings and take control. For 10,000 years, they had traveled from planet to planet, turning entire species into slaves with just their thoughts. No army could fight them because the soldiers would become their enemies before the battle even started. But something strange happened when the Zorathi tried to control human minds. Nothing worked. Their mental powers hit human consciousness and bounced away like rocks thrown at a steel wall. The Zorathi commanders felt confused for the first time in centuries. Never before had they met a species that could resist their control. Kim Mina watched from her window as Zorathi tried again and again to take over human minds. She could feel their alien thoughts pressing against her consciousness, but they could not get in. It was like having someone try to push through a locked door that would never open. The Zorathi were angry, but they were not stupid. They had conquered hundreds of worlds before meeting humans. If they could not control human minds directly, they would find another way. Within 3 weeks, the sky filled with different ships. These belonged to species that humans had met before, friendly aliens who had visited Earth to trade and share knowledge. But now these aliens looked different. Their eyes were empty and cold. They moved like machines, not like living beings. The gentle Altarian traders had been Earth's first alien friends. They had brought beautiful crystals and shared stories about distant stars. Now they climbed out of their ships with weapons, their tentacles moving without any emotion. The Zorathi had taken control of their minds completely. The proud vegan explorers had given humans maps of the galaxy and taught them about space travel. These tall, graceful beings had been like teachers to humanity. Now they marched through human cities like robots, their silver skin dull and lifeless. Park Ji-hoon lived in an apartment near the university where he worked as a translator. He had many alien friends before the Zorathi came. His best friend was Ambassador Neltar, an Altarian who had lived on Earth for 5 years. They had worked together on research projects and shared meals together. Now Park Ji-hoon watched from his window as Neltar led groups of human prisoners through the streets. The ambassador's tentacles moved with cold precision. His bioluminescent patches, which used to glow bright blue when he was happy, were now dim gray. 3 months ago, they had been planning to write a book together about human and alien languages. Now Neltar was just another puppet controlled by Zorathi masters. The Zorathi had turned humanity's friends into their enemies. Every alien species that had once helped humans was now being used to hurt them. It was the cruelest trick possible. Using love and friendship as weapons, human soldiers tried to fight back, but how could they shoot their former friends? How could they kill beings who had been guests in their homes? The aliens were victims too, trapped inside their own bodies, while the Zorathi controlled every movement. Kim Mina realized the terrible irony of their situation. Humans were the only species in the galaxy that could resist Zorathi mind control. Their consciousness was different somehow, protected in a way that made them immune to mental domination. But this gift had become a curse. Because the Zorathi could not control human minds, they had to control human bodies instead. While other species became willing slaves who served happily, humans had to be forced into slavery through pain and fear. They were beaten, imprisoned, and killed if they resisted. The Zorathi built processing centers in every city. These were places where humans were sorted like objects. The strong ones were sent to work in mines and factories. The smart ones were forced to operate alien technology. The young ones disappeared into camps that no one talked about. Every day, Park Ji-hoon watched more humans being marched through the streets by their former alien friends. The irony was bitter and cruel. Humanity had the power to resist the greatest mental controllers in the galaxy, but they were the only ones being physically enslaved. The Zarathi had won not through their greatest strength, but by turning that strength into a weakness. They had made humanity's immunity into isolation, and their freedom into the worst kind of prison. As Kim Mina watched the empty-eyed aliens march human prisoners past her window, she wondered if their resistance was worth anything at all. They had kept their minds free, but lost everything else that mattered. 3 long years had passed since the Zarathi came to Earth. Lee Do-hyun stood in the hot sun, watching human workers build another giant statue. The statue showed a Zarathi warrior standing over defeated enemies. It was ugly and cruel, but Lee Do-hyun had to make sure it was built perfectly. If he did not, the alien guards would punish him and his workers. Every day was the same. Wake up at dawn, work until dark, eat thin soup, sleep on hard beds. Lee Do-hyun had been a successful architect before the invasion. Now he supervised construction crews that built monuments to their own defeat. The irony tasted bitter in his mouth, but he had learned to swallow bitter things. His wife Song Ye-ji worked in the language centers across the city. She spent her days translating alien building plans from Zarathi symbols into human languages. The work was complex and tiring. One small mistake could mean hours of punishment. She had been a university professor before, teaching literature to eager students. Now she helped their enemies build better prisons. Both Lee Do-hyun and Song Ye-ji knew they were helping the Zarathi grow stronger. Every monument they built reminded humans of their defeat. Every translation helped the aliens control their world better. But they had no choice. Resistance meant death, and they had seen too many friends die already. The Zarathi had grown more angry as the years passed. They could not understand why they could not control human minds. Every other species in the galaxy had been easy to dominate. The Zarathi would touch their minds and the aliens would become willing slaves. But humans were different, and this made the Zarathi furious. Their anger showed in cruel ways. Public executions happened every week in the city centers. Humans who tried to fight back were killed in front of crowds. The Zarathi wanted everyone to see what happened to rebels. Fear became a weapon more powerful than any gun. Forced labor was everywhere. Humans dug in mines, worked in factories, and built structures they did not understand. Children as young as 12 were taken from their families to work. Old people who could barely walk were forced to carry heavy loads. The Zarathi did not care about human suffering, but the worst punishment was the attack on human culture. The Zarathi began burning libraries, saying books were dangerous. Museums were emptied and their treasures destroyed. Art galleries were torn down. Music was forbidden except for simple work songs. Even speaking was becoming dangerous. Song Ye-ji watched in horror as guards burned her old university library. Thousands of books turned to ash in minutes. Poetry, novels, history, science, all of it disappeared in smoke. The guards were controlled aliens who had once been scholars themselves. Now they destroyed knowledge without any emotion. Speaking any language except basic work commands became a crime. Humans caught talking about anything other than their jobs were sent to punishment camps. Families could not tell stories to their children. Friends could not share memories. Zarathi were trying to kill human culture through silence. Dr. Kim Mina had been moved to a research facility outside the city. The building was surrounded by high walls and electric fences. Inside, human scientists were forced to study alien technology. They had to find ways to make Zarathi weapons stronger and their control systems better. Kim Mina hated every moment of her work, but she was also learning. The Zarathi had given her access to their communication devices so she could improve them. As she studied these alien machines, she began to understand something important about her captors. The breakthrough came on a cold morning in her 3rd year of imprisonment. Kim Mina was examining a Zarathi communication device when she realized something shocking. The device had no parts for making sound. It had no speakers, no voice transmitters, nothing that could create spoken words. She looked at more devices and found the same thing. All Zarathi communication was done through direct mind contact. They had no technology for speech because they had no use for speech. But this was more than just preference. It was evolution. Kim Mina studied captured Zorathi body scans and medical data. What she found made her hands shake with excitement and fear. The Zorathi had no vocal cords. Their throats were completely different from human throats. They had evolved beyond the need for spoken language millions of years ago. During recreation time, Kim Mina found Choi Minsu, a former military officer who had been captured while trying to organize resistance. They walked together in the small prison yard, pretending to exercise while they talked in whispers. They cannot speak. Mina told him quietly. Not just will not, cannot. They have forgotten that voices exist. To them, communication only happens in the mind. Choi Minsu stared at her with wide eyes. You mean they do not know about talking? About using sounds to share thoughts? Exactly, Kim Mina whispered. They understand telepathy perfectly, but spoken language is completely unknown to them. It is like trying to explain color to someone who was born blind. This news was too important to keep secret. Choi Minsu had contacts in the underground resistance network. Slowly, carefully, the information spread from prisoner to prisoner, from camp to camp, from city to city. Humanity had found something the Zorathi did not understand. After 3 years of defeat, they had discovered their enemy's weakness. It was not a weapon or a technology. It was something so basic that the Zorathi could not even imagine it as a threat. Human voices might be the key to freedom. Han Seojin crouched behind the broken concrete wall, watching the prison facility ahead. 6 other resistance fighters waited with him in the darkness. They had planned this rescue mission for weeks, studying guard patterns and finding weak points in the security. The facility held 200 human prisoners who were being forced to build weapons for the Zorathi. Han Seojin's younger brother was inside, along with many other people from their neighborhood. Tonight, they would try to free as many as possible. In the past, resistance fighters used hand signals to communicate during missions. They would point, tap, or use simple gestures to coordinate their attacks. Sometimes they wrote messages on paper and passed them silently. Speaking was too dangerous because sound might alert the guards. But tonight was different. Han Seojin had heard the news that Dr. Kim Mina discovered. The Zorathi could not understand spoken language. They had never evolved the ability to hear voices as communication. This gave humans a chance to try something new. Remember, Han Seojin whispered. To his team, we coordinate everything through voice commands. Speak quietly but do not use signals. Let us see what happens when the guards hear us talking. The team moved toward the facility fence. Han Seojin spoke softly into his radio. Team 1, move to the east wall now. Team 2, wait for my signal. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it was still human speech. Something strange happened immediately. The Altarian guards patrolling the fence began to move differently. Their steps became uneven and confused. These aliens had been graceful and precise for 3 years, but now they stumbled and paused as if something was bothering them. Team 2? The guards looked dizzy. Han Seojin whispered into his radio. Continue with the plan. The effect grew stronger. One Altarian guard stopped walking completely and stood still, shaking his head like he was trying to clear fog from his mind. Another guard dropped his weapon and stared at the sky with a puzzled expression. Han Seojin's team cut through the fence and entered the facility. They continued to use quiet voice commands to coordinate their movements. Turn left at the corner. Watch the door. 3 guards ahead. Each spoken instruction seemed to make the alien guards more confused and sluggish. The rescue mission was more successful than they had hoped. The alien guards were so disoriented that they barely fought back. The resistance fighters freed 50 prisoners and escaped into the night. Not a single human was injured. 3 days later, Dr. Kim Mina sat in a secret meeting with other resistance leaders. She had been temporarily released from the research facility to help with special projects, but she was actually sharing information with the underground movement. The Zorathi masters cannot interpret what they are hearing, she explained to the group of 20 fighters. When we speak, we create a form of communication that exists completely outside their understanding. Imagine trying to control someone through a sense you do not have. If you were born deaf, you would not know how to use sound as a weapon. The resistance leaders looked at each other with growing excitement. For 3 years, they had tried to fight the Zorathi with guns and bombs. They had lost every battle, because their weapons were too weak. But now they had discovered something the Zorathi had never encountered before. Yang Su-young, a woman who had taught elementary school before the invasion, raised her hand. What if we tried speaking to the enslaved aliens directly? We know that hearing our voices disrupts Zorathi control passively. What might happen if we used speech intentionally like a weapon? The idea seemed crazy, but it was worth testing. Yang Su-young had always been creative in her teaching methods. She understood how to communicate with different types of minds. 3 weeks later, Jung Hyun-wook volunteered for the first intentional voice contact experiment. He was a factory worker who had been captured and released several times. The Zorathi considered him harmless because he always returned to work without causing trouble. Jung Hyun-wook found a group of enslaved vegan workers during their rest period. These tall, silver-skinned aliens had been working in the metal processing plant for 2 years. Their movements were mechanical and their eyes were empty, like all controlled aliens. Jung Hyun-wook sat down near them and began to recite an old Korean poem he had learned in school. It was about a bird that refused to stop singing even when winter came. The poem talked about freedom and hope and the power of never giving up. Even in the darkest winter, the bird sings its song of spring. Jung Hyun-wook said softly in Korean. Even when the world is cold, the heart remembers warmth. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The vegan workers stopped their mechanical movements. Their biomechanical implants, which usually glowed steady blue, began to flicker like broken lights. One of the aliens turned to look directly at Jung Hyun-wook. For the first time in years, the alien's eyes showed real emotion. Confusion, fear, hope, and memory all mixed together in that gaze. The alien's mouth opened and closed several times as if trying to remember how to speak. Finally, words came out in broken, heavily accented Korean. I remember, the vegan whispered. I remember my name. My name is Veltar. I had a name before this. Jung Hyun-wook felt tears in his eyes. The alien was fighting against the Zorathi control, using human words as weapons against his mental chains. The news about Jung Hyun-wook's success traveled fast through the human settlements. People whispered the story in work camps, passed notes in factories, and shared the information through secret networks. Within 2 weeks, every human on Earth knew that speaking could break Zorathi control over enslaved aliens. Kim Tae-hyung was a young man who had lost his entire family in the first year of occupation. He worked in the ruins of Busan, clearing debris from destroyed buildings. The city had once been beautiful, full of art galleries and theaters. Now it was mostly rubble and empty streets. But Kim Tae-hyung remembered the old cultural district where people used to gather for festivals and concerts. The buildings were broken, but the open space was still there. He had an idea that seemed impossible but might work. Kim Tae-hyung began secretly contacting other humans in the city. He sent messages through the underground network asking people to meet him at sunset in 3 days. He told them to bring something to recite, a poem, a song, a story, anything with words that meant something to them. On the chosen evening, people began arriving at the ruined cultural district. Kim Tae-hyung expected maybe 50 people, but hundreds kept coming. By sunset, 3,000 humans had gathered in the broken plaza. Old men brought poems they had memorized as children. Mothers sang lullabies they had once sung to their babies. Students recited scientific formulas from school. Teachers shared stories from books that had been burned. Everyone had something to say. As the sun touched the horizon, Kim Tae-hyung stood on a pile of broken concrete and raised his voice. Tonight, we remember who we are. Tonight, we speak for ourselves and for our friends who cannot speak. 3,000 voices began to fill the air. Some people spoke Korean, Others used English, Japanese, Chinese, or dozens of other languages. The sounds mixed together into something that had never existed before, a symphony of human speech from every corner of the world. The effect was more powerful than anyone had imagined. Every enslaved alien within 2 kilometers stopped working at the same moment. Altarian guards dropped their weapons. Vegan workers stepped away from their machines. Even the flying patrols began to drift aimlessly in the sky. The crystalline, Zorathi ships hanging over the city began to flicker with strange lights. The smooth surfaces rippled like water, and weird sounds came from inside them. The aliens who lived in those ships were feeling something they had never experienced before: complete confusion about communication. Some enslaved aliens wandered away from their posts, walking in circles with lost expressions on their faces. Others stood perfectly still, their biomechanical implants sparking and failing. A few began to remember pieces of their old lives, calling out names of family members they had forgotten. Dr. Kim Mina watched the event from her research facility and took careful notes. She could see the effects clearly through her laboratory windows. Human speech creates interference patterns in whatever the Zorathi use for telepathic control, she wrote. The more complex the language, the stronger the disruption becomes. The speaking event lasted for 2 hours. When it ended, the effects continued for days. Enslaved aliens throughout the city remained confused and disoriented. Some regained enough memory to help human prisoners escape. Others simply refused to follow orders, standing still until Zorathi reinforcements arrived. Park Ji-won had been a language professor before the invasion. He spoke 7 human languages and had been learning Altarian and Vegan before the Zorathi came. Now he was a prisoner in a translation center, but he had been secretly studying the effects of different languages on enslaved aliens. Park Ji-won made an important discovery during the weeks following the Busan event. He noticed that Korean words affected Altarian slaves more strongly than other languages. When humans spoke Korean near Altarian guards, the aliens became very confused and often walked away from their duties. But English had a different effect. Vegan workers responded more strongly to English words than to Korean. When humans spoke English near enslaved vegans, the aliens often began to remember their own names and histories. Each human language creates different frequency patterns, Park Ji-won explained to other prisoners. Korean disrupts Zorathi control over Altarians most effectively, but English works better on vegans. It is like each language unlocks different parts of their minds. This discovery led to more experiments. Humans began using specific languages to target specific alien species. Spanish worked well on the insect-like Centaurians. German was effective against the rock-like Silurians. French helped the plant-based Verdun species remember their old lives. The Zorathi noticed what was happening and responded with terrible anger. They began capturing humans and performing surgical operations to destroy their vocal cords. Thousands of people lost their ability to speak forever. The procedures were painful and often fatal. But the resistance had grown too large to stop. Secret speaking circles formed in every human settlement. People gathered in hidden places to practice using their voices as weapons. They taught each other poems and songs in different languages. They shared stories and memories that had been forbidden for years. Most importantly, humans began teaching enslaved aliens how to pronounce human words. This was dangerous work because the Zorathi killed any alien caught speaking. But some enslaved beings were desperate enough to take the risk. Underground networks of vocal communication spread across the planet. Humans and aliens whispered to each other in dark corners, sharing words that the Zorathi could not understand or control. Each conversation was an act of rebellion against an empire built on silence. The enslaved aliens began to remember themselves one word at a time. Every human syllable they learned made them a little more free. Dr. Kim Mina worked day and night in her secret laboratory. Over the past months, several alien scientists had broken free from Zorathi control with the help of human voices. These recovered aliens were eager to help fight their former masters. Veltar, the vegan who had first remembered his name, was now working with Kim Mina. So was Nixara, an Altarian mathematician, and Gorthek, a Centaurian engineer. Together they studied how human speech affected Zorathi telepathic control. The breakthrough came when they discovered something amazing. When humans spoke different languages at the same time, the effect was much stronger than single languages alone. Korean and English together created more interference than either language by itself. Adding Spanish made it even more powerful. The languages create harmonic resonances, Veltar explained in his improving Korean. Like musical notes played together. When many human languages combine, they make a sound frequency that completely breaks Zorathi mental control. Kim Mina's hands shook with excitement as she understood what this meant. We need every human voice on Earth speaking at the same time. Every language, every dialect, every way humans express themselves through words. She sent messages through the Resistance Network to every human settlement on the planet. The plan was simple but required perfect timing. On the 4th anniversary of Earth's invasion, every human would speak at exactly the same moment. Lim Minji had been a communication engineer before the invasion. Now she worked secretly to coordinate the global resistance network. She spent weeks setting up hidden radio transmitters and hijacking satellite systems. Every human group needed to know exactly when to begin speaking. Kang Dong-hyuk organized resistance cells to take control of Zorathi broadcasting systems. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. The resistance fighters would have to capture alien communication centers and use them to spread human voices across the galaxy. The plan was so bold, it seemed impossible. Every human settlement would recite a carefully chosen combination of literature, science, music, and simple declarations of freedom. Children would speak alongside adults. Prisoners would join their voices with free humans. Every language on Earth would be heard at once. The preparations took months. People practiced reciting poems in languages they did not speak. Scientists memorized mathematical formulas in dozens of different tongues. Parents taught their children lullabies from countries they had never seen. The day arrived on a cold morning in March. It was exactly 4 years since the Zorathi had first appeared over Earth's cities. At precisely noon, Greenwich Mean Time, the Liberation Symphony would begin. In hidden bunkers beneath destroyed cities, children began reciting multiplication tables in Mandarin Chinese. 1 times 1 equals 1, 2 times 2 equals 4, their young voices said clearly. Their words carried the hope of a generation that had grown up under alien rule. In work camps surrounded by electric fences, scholars began chanting Shakespeare in English. To be or not to be, that is the question, they said together. The beautiful words of human literature filled the air where only commands and suffering had existed before. Families gathered in secret places, whispered lullabies in Korean, Arabic, Spanish, and hundreds of other languages. Mothers sang to babies who had never heard their native tongues. Fathers shared stories from cultures that had been forbidden for years. The cacophony of human voices grew and grew. Scientists recited physics formulas in German. Poets shared verses in French. Children sang nursery rhymes in Japanese. Adults called out simple declarations of freedom in every language humans had ever spoken. The sound was unlike anything that had ever existed. It was not music, but it was beautiful. It was not organized, but it had perfect harmony. It was the voice of humanity expressing its diversity and its determination to be free. Kang Dong-hyuk and his fighters had successfully captured several Zorathi communication centers. The alien broadcasting systems designed to spread telepathic control signals across space now carried human voices instead. The Liberation Symphony traveled beyond Earth through hijacked networks. The effect was immediate and incredible. Every Zorathi ship above Earth began to shake and flicker. The crystalline hulls cracked as harmonic frequencies disrupted their telepathic systems. Inside the ships, Zorathi commanders experienced something they had never felt before: complete communication failure. But the real miracle happened across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds where enslaved alien species had served the Zorathi for centuries. The Liberation Symphony arrived through communication networks. As human voices reached these distant planets, something magnificent occurred. The mental chains that had bound countless species for thousands of years shattered like glass. On world after world, Enslaved aliens stopped their work and looked up at their Zorathi masters with clear eyes for the first time in generations. The rebellion was instant and universal. Altarians remembered their poetry. Vegans recalled their science. Centaurians found their music again. Every species that had been enslaved suddenly remembered who they were before the Zorathi came. The Zorathi, who had ruled through telepathic control for 10,000 years, found themselves powerless in a universe where speech mattered. They could not adapt to vocal communication because they had evolved beyond it millions of years ago. Within hours, Zorathi ships were fleeing toward the edges of known space. Park Sujin stood in the ruins of Seoul, watching the last Zorathi vessels disappear into the distance like dark clouds blown away by wind. Around her, humans and aliens worked together to clear debris and begin rebuilding their world. Ambassador Neltar approached her slowly. His tentacles moved with natural grace again, not mechanical precision. His bioluminescent patches glowed, bright blue with genuine emotion. Tears ran down his alien face as he spoke in carefully pronounced Korean. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for teaching us to speak again." Humanity had become known across the galaxy as the Voicebringers. They had proven that sometimes the greatest weapon against oppression was simply the courage to speak truth into silence.